Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. If you're just joining us now, we're so glad to see you here today and to have you here for a Real Conversations workshop by Shuva Center. And the topic is challenging conversations with oneself and others. And this is going to be a really beautiful conversation between Rabbi Iggy and Jordan Aftanas tonight, all about how do we address the inner critic in our mind, and what are the tools that we can use to talk to that inner dialogue that's happening in our own heads. And then also, how can we approach challenging conversations with others and really contend with the differences between us, and actually foster connection and face the things that we get to face in this life, so that we can live into our values and that we could support our recovery. For people who are struggling with addiction, this is really a powerful workshop to kind of deal with that inner climate and also the outer world. How do we interact with the outer world? So happy for all of you to be here. If you're just joining us now, please hop into the chat. Let us know your name, where you're coming in from in the world, and then what your intention is, what calls out to you, what kind of questions are coming up for you and that brought you here today. In the meantime, I will introduce our two hosts today. So we've got Rabbi Iggy, who is the founder of the Shuva Center. And he's a renowned Talmud teacher, spiritual counselor, artist and educator. He grew up between Belgium and Israel, and as well as the U.S. in a traditional Jewish Orthodox home, and is the author, speaker, teacher, and a contributor on subjects ranging from Talmud, Jewish text, spirituality, addiction, recovery, fatherhood, and LGBTQI issues. And so he is our CEO of Shuva Center, and which is a new long-term Jewish recovery community in Brooklyn. And he was formerly the director of spiritual counseling at Beit Shuva in Los Angeles. And so we also have Jordan Aftanas here today. We're so excited to have her here. She is a whole life strategist and coach who offers business and life coaching at the intersection of ancient mindfulness practices, including Ayurveda, breathwork, and meditation, and as well as strategic, intentional action through personal development and self-reflection. And she leads coaching programs, group workshops, immersion retreats that are intentionally designed to empower people to act more courageously in their life by the guidance of their own inner brilliance. And she's also a certified AYL master life coach and healing practitioner. So we're so excited to have you here, Jordan, and for Rabbi Iggy and you to have this conversation. And before we begin, I just want to say that if you have questions throughout this workshop, please drop them into the chat. And actually, when you do share your questions, make sure to share it with all panelists and attendees. So make sure to hit that setting so that we can all see your questions. And then Rabbi Iggy and Jordan will address your questions throughout, but there'll also be time toward the end where they'll dive into some of your questions. So please, if anything's showing up for you, pop into the chat, just drop in those questions and we'll be tracking those. And what else? Also, I invite you to stay till the end, because Rabbi Iggy and Jordan will share what's happening and more ways you can get involved at Shuva Center, as well as in Jordan's coaching programs, etc. So you'll definitely want to stay till the end to find out what's going on, how you can get more involved, and how you can do continued work around the topic that's happening tonight. So, and I'm Jess Littman. I'm a mindfulness coach, and I also work with Shuva Center, and I'm just grateful to be a part of putting on great programming with Shuva Center and some amazing people out in the world and practitioners, and putting different topic areas in intersection with each other so that we can grow and heal and support our recovery in the process. With that, I will turn it over to Rabbi Iggy and Jordan.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that introduction. Thank you, Jordan, for joining us. We're going to dive into questions in a second, but I think one of the interesting things, as as Jesse just said, right? So like today, somebody asked me, he's like, well, why are you having these sort of like, right? So like, and I think that for me, one of the most exciting things is to recognize, right, and to live what we always teach, which is connection, right, and sort of to have important conversations with people from all sorts of different backgrounds, whether like Jewish, not Jewish, mindfulness, you know, Buddhism, whatever. That the conversation is so rich when we are able to really sort of dive into sort of the different wisdom that is out there. So thank you, and thank you for sharing, and thank you for being here for this conversation. This will be interesting.
Yeah.
I think the first questions I have, I think just to start it up, just to start us off, excuse me, is right. We talk about sort of like the inner critic, right? We talk about that voice in our head. I guess first question is like, does everybody have that? Right. So like, I think, right. So like, does everybody have that, or is it just, I mean, there's definitely time in my life. Is it just me that's like constantly like, so like, right, riddled with this sort of like, voice in my head. It's like, you know, not good at this and this and this, and I can't do that, and that's not good. Right. So
Yeah.
what do you think?
Well, I mean, I have my opinion, but I would love to know anybody else out there. Like, do you feel like you have the inner critic? Do you feel like it's just you? Do you feel like everybody has one? I would love to hear. You can put it in the chat box if you feel like it's something that is challenging for you. When you and I were talking about this workshop and what we wanted to discuss, I know we discussed, well, we want to talk about how to talk with other people and how to navigate challenging conversations. Shows up sometimes. But we also talked about, but first it's really important that we have a more compassionate internal relationship with ourselves. I personally am of the belief that I think everybody has the inner critic or has some form of a voice in there that creates a sense of self-doubt, a self-criticism. And the reason why I believe that everybody has it is because I think it's a survival instinct, actually. From the ways in which that I study the inner critic and this narrative inside of our mind. So you can call it a lot of different things, right? Like sometimes it comes up as self-doubt, self-criticism, negative self-talk, all of these things. But really what it is a survival mechanism to protect us and keep us into what we believe is familiar. So anytime we begin to inch out into something that is new, unfamiliar, puts us at the risk of feeling embarrassed, failure, isolation, then that's when the inner critic comes up and tries to stop us from taking action forward. So because I believe everybody has a natural innate survival instinct that's connected neurologically to them, I think we all have an inner critic. I have not met one person that's like, no, everything's good in here. I feel good all the time. Nobody's ever harsh. You know, I don't know anybody. I don't know if you do.
No, I don't think so. Although I will say that I think I've met people whose voice, not the inner critic voice, is stronger or weaker, right? I've met people with like much stronger sort of like inner critic voice that can be really harmful to them, and people with less of that. It's there, but they're able to like, oh, just go away, and it goes away. So I have like different variances in that, right? So in the chat, somebody just wrote, right? Aria Huffington called the inner critic the annoying college roommate they won't leave.
That is such a great tactic of working with the inner critic, because I know we talked about different ways to navigate it. So I agree. I think everybody has it. We have different intensities of it. And what we have to do is, personally, I don't believe it ever goes away, ever. I think we just learn how to dance with it, how to navigate it, and how to not let it run the show. So that's where I think we get really debilitated, is when it feels like we're allowing the inner critic, this negative self-talk, to run the show, to make our decisions for us, to paralyze us. Oh my God, it was a really college roommate. Yeah.
You're like, I was the annoying college roommate. No. Well, maybe, but no.
No. But I mean, that sounds funny, right? But it's actually a really powerful tool to personify the inner critic, because what that does is it separates it from self. Because I think when you're saying when people have an inner critic that's a lot louder and a lot more aggressive, it's when we identify with it. And it took me really recently to realize I am not my inner critic. Like the narratives that are coming up are not me in my truest essence and my form. It's a misguided safety mechanism trying to keep me protected. And so when I was able to separate, when you, like, the most powerful thing you can do is separate yourself from it and realize, I am not this. I am not these thoughts, because that is what is most painful. I am not these harsh things that are coming up in my mind.
Right.
If that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect. I think it's funny because one of the things I keep repeating in other things is, and I think I even talked about it the last week conversation we had, it keeps coming up, is this verse in Proverbs that says, anxiety in a man's heart, you should talk to it. That is, you should start to have a conversation with it. And I think that what you just said is very important. I think is the first tool that we're offering today, is to create a persona, if you will, in a way, so that you can separate yourself and have a conversation with it. Because, and that's sort of one of the things we'll talk about today, and already talking, is that the self-critic is not like anything else. It's not all bad, but the self-critic has a voice in there that is also trying to protect you, right? The self-critic is there, and the question now is, how do I use that, right? So somebody just wrote, right? So like, right, I've been realizing that my inner critic has been getting lost in BS stories, my work, right? I know that the stories are BS stories, but when I am in a tougher place, it takes over. Yes, I think, and I think for a lot of people, right, because that inner critic is originally designed to protect you, right? The proverb is Proverbs 12, chapter 12, verse 25. Lloyd. So Mishlei 12:25. Sorry, I have to translate in my head because it's Mishlei Yud Bet Cafe. So I have to translate in my head to sort of like go through the numbers. Right. So I think that's the first thing we do. And I love that, because I think so many of us identify with the critic because we think that's who we are.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. And so, and like I said, I think for me, when I really realized, like, one, it's not who I am. And I love the word misguided. Like, that really helps me, because when I hear the narratives, like, another tool that's really powerful, like the first thing we have to practice doing, and all of this is a practice, right? Because like we're saying, it never goes away. You just learn how to navigate it differently. So the strongest tool in the practice is to identify when the inner critic has arrived.
Right.
Like, oh, it's no longer me thinking, it's the inner critic. And how to break that pattern as soon as you can. And so that's why, like, you know, we laughed at the annoying college roommate thing, but that's a really great way to be able to identify when it feels like it's no longer me, my true real essence, and it's this different energy, this inner critic that's trying to protect me and keep me safe in some way. And so we have to learn how, and the least comfortable part about it is we can't ignore it. Like, we have to allow it to arrive, and we have to acknowledge it, but we can't allow it to make our decisions for us. And so personifying it is a really powerful way. Naming it, having a verbal, like, pattern break is one of my tools I go back to often. Like, as soon as I begin to hear the narratives, like, I try to say, oh, the inner critic's here. And her name is Rhonda. I'm not sure why, but
her name is Rhonda?
Her name is Rhonda.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So so by the way, everybody, tell us, what is the inner critic name for you? Name your inner critic. I'm dying to see what people are writing. Like, what's that, right? If Jordan's is Rhonda, I don't know what mine is. I have to think about mine. Ronda Rousey. No, not Ronda Rousey. She's awesome, Ronda Rousey.
Yeah. And they're not the enemy. So like we said, they are Fifi, Karen. This is awesome.
Kathy, Phoebe, I like that. Exactly. That's amazing.
A lot of the times too, they will, Mom, yep, that's totally, I was just about to say, they will remind us in some way of people in our lives typically. Sometimes they're our primary caregiver, sometimes it's a boss, sometimes it's a bully, sometimes it's a teacher that was really harsh on us, an ex-partner, whatever. So, because basically what it's doing is, I like to think of it, it's like when we're coming close to the edge of our comfort zone, that's when the inner critic gets louder. So that means we're doing something different, risky, bold. We're trying to change or evolve in some way, and it's scared. So it pulls deep down into those harsh narratives that they know get right. You know what I mean? You know, the inner critic, it's like the stuff that you're like, man, that's the meanest thing somebody could say to me. And it's because it's trying to keep you to stay put. So, you know,
it knows your buttons, right? It's like family, right? They know exactly where to push to get the biggest reaction.
Absolutely. And that's why we have to continuously try to have a relationship where we're navigating it, because it evolves as we evolve. As soon as we get more knowledge and understanding of the inner critic, it doesn't want you to outsmart it. So it will continue to evolve. It will continue to hold on to those, like you're saying, the buttons that are most tender that will keep you staying put. So for instance, I work with a lot of women. Someone's asking about the proverb again.
The line says, when there is anxiety in a man's heart, right? Yasichena. The Hebrew says, right? Yasichena, which means to have a conversation with it, right? And turn it into joy with a good word. That is that I'm using anxiety in the sense of saying in the critic is sort of when you're going through something, a good way is to personify, to have a conversation, right? Hi, anxiety, right? So like, you talk about inner critic or anxiety, like I see them as like, hello, good friend, right? Hi, friend, because they're there for a reason, right? So I think I gave the story before as well, that for me, for example, it's not exactly related to the inner critic, but I'm very lucky. I don't really have back pain, right? So like, even though I'm an overweight, middle-aged man, right? I don't really have back pain. The only time I have back pain is when I'm really stressed. And now, right, I know that if my back is hurting, it's not because of the chair, it's not because of the Zoom, it's not because of the posture, right? It's because I have to ask myself, what are you stressed about? So now, right, when the back pain comes, I'm like, oh, hi, hello, friend. Because you're here to tell me you're not looking at your stress, dude. This is what to do. And I think in very similar ways, when we look at some anxieties or some inner critic, to be like, why are you here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I saw a couple of people in the chat saying similar things, like how brave it is to invite that energy in, because of course what we want to do is ignore the pain, because it's very uncomfortable to sit with the things that the inner critic is telling us. It's very hard to sit with that negative self-talk. And so for me, another tool or another way to work with it is to try to understand its motives, So for instance, I'll be very real and very honest. Like when I decided to do this webinar, I felt my inner critic coming up, because it's like, what do you know about recovery? What do you know about addiction? I have family members that have had addiction, and I've navigated it in different ways, but I wouldn't personally identify with that. And so I felt my inner critic being like, you shouldn't do this. This is not safe. You don't know what you're talking about. You can't help them, all these kinds of things. And so I had to sit with that and be like, one, name it. Hi, inner critic, you have arrived. I see you. Come. I like whoever said, Kathy said, come have tea. No.
Baby
said that. Come have tea with me. What are you trying to tell me? And what I felt like it was telling me was, this is something new. This is uncharted territory. This is maybe outside of your comfort zone. This is a growth edge, and you're not certain of what the outcome is. So that's that fear of rejection, of embarrassment, of shame, all of those things. And I had to be like, okay, I hear you. I hear you that this feels risky, but trust me that I got this. And that's another really powerful tool. It's to have an affirmation that you can speak directly to this voice inside of you, whether you want to call it anxiety, stress, critic, doubt, and have something that feels like a response to allow it to just pass on through. So for me is, thank you, but I've got this. Like, thank you for your concern. Thank you for your misguided information, but I trust that I got this. And if it fails, if I do horribly, if I fall on my face, I trust I'll also grow and learn from that experience as well. So that's another way.
It's funny. I think because I have those feelings as well sometimes, right? And two things. One is, like I said, sort of like, right? Sort of like when I feel that means like okay, that means you have to learn more. That means, what is it that you're trying to say? Why do you want to say yes to this, right? Why do you want to teach about a subject that maybe is a little more foreign to you? Like, right? Can you learn from it? Can you grow from it? Can you find, all right, now clearly I'm drawn to this and I want to do this, but maybe I need to learn more, read more, do more. And the
Mm-hmm.
second one, which again for me is always like an invitation of like, okay, again, in the critic, thank you for reminding me that I don't have any mastery in this and I need to learn more and be open. And the second one, right, and this is sort of the rabbi speaking, is the opposite of fear in that sense. The opposite of a critic is faith. But you say, okay, yes, I got this. For me, it's like, I have faith. I have faith, right, that wherever I'm doing, right, sort of like, right, I'm going to do it with Jordan, right? So if I say something that's, not whatever the best version, right, there's somebody else there. I have faith that the people can see my intentions when it comes to sort of talking or these things, right? And those two combined, I think, create a very powerful tool, at least for me,
Mm-hmm.
around this, right? Thanks, I got this. I wanted Latisha too. But one of the preview comments, I really liked this, and she said here, where is it? It was about the car. Sorry, just scrolling through. Yes, the inner critic could be in the car, in the back seat, but not in the driver's seat, right? That's sort of like, right? Chava wrote this for Liz Gilbert, right? So yes, right? And I think that sort of that is thing, right? Moshe is right. I found my inner critic hiding in my journal. No, you have an outer critic. That's me. I'm your outer critic. You don't need an inner critic. Right? Sort of like, right? Moshe is one of the people in our groups. So, right?
Yeah, and
Um, yeah.
I think because the first question was, does everybody have it? Personally, I believe yes. I would be shocked if there's somebody in here that says I've never had a negative self-talk. Then let's learn from them, get them on the panel, because
Bye-bye.
I personally haven't heard of it. And so and everybody has fear. I think we look at people that we admire and we're like, they're fearless. And I don't think that's the truth. I think they just have a more harmonious relationship with fear, with doubt, with any sort of inner negative dialogue.
Right.
And that's what we all have to do, is how do we dance with it more, but
Right.
not let it be our decision maker.
Right.
So when you're
Exactly.
saying like the front seat versus the back seat, it's like, it's going to be there, it's going to try to keep you safe in some way. And I think when we can look at it and be like, and this is another tool too, you kind of talked of this, of like evidence or like having proof, like that's a big one. Sometimes I like to think of it as like I am a detective and I need to prove if what it's saying is true. And so I'll look for all the evidence that would either prove or disprove its, narrative in my mind. And same thing, I look for things that make me feel safe. It's like, well, if I get uncomfortable, then I have him there, or I have my experience, or I have this, or I'm a great listener, whatever the things might be that make me feel safe, and kind of allow that voice to feel heard.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so somebody said about their journal, one of the greatest things is another tool, just drop in tools, is doing dialogue journaling. So I'll even say, I think you said, hi, inner critic, you're here, welcome. What do you need to tell me? And I will imagine that I can channel the inner critic, write everything down that it's saying, and talk with it, whether it's in my mind, on my journal. But imagine that I'm having a dialogue with it. It's like, I hear you. I hear that that seems scary, but I think that it'll be okay. Or I actually think that's misguided. Let me give you this perspective. And I think when you think of it as like a kid having a temper tantrum, it's like, if you ignore it, it's not going to get any better. I don't have kids, so maybe I'm wrong. But if you
It
ignore it,
depends. It depends on the kid. Some kids will raise the ante, and some kids will go. It
yeah,
depends on like the person. It depends on the person. It depends on the parent too.
totally, totally. So yeah, but maybe what it needs is just to be seen and heard, like we all do as humans from
Right.
a young age to grown adults. We just need to be seen, heard, and acknowledged. And I think sometimes that's what the inner critic is trying to do. And
Right.
so as we learn how to navigate it a little bit more, but don't let it stop us from doing the things that are in line with
Right.
our values and congruent with who we want to be in the world.
Right. So I love the comment, because I think it sort of leads us to where I'm sort of heading next with this, which, right, my inner critic got tired of dealing with me and started focusing on criticizing others. It seems the same, right? It seems the same critic uh, uh, that needs to be recognized. 100%. I think the most critical people, the most judgmental people, of course, are very judgmental towards themselves as well. Or sometimes it's just a tool to deflect from others, right? Right. And I think that um, part of right, what we're trying to talk about today is not just sort of the inner critic and that, but right, sort of having these difficult conversations, because I think that uh, part of what stops us from having conversations that we should be having or we want to be having, but we're afraid to have, is because of that inner critic, is because of that sort of voice in our head that says, you're not good enough. How could you do this? What if they reject me? Right? Like all the different things that go into sort of like our avoidant behavior
Yeah.
towards the conversations that we should be having, right?
Mm-hmm.
And are very difficult, right? Both with the self, right? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes they just sound like inner critic, right? So for example, again, in the spirit of sharing, right? The inner critic that says, oh, Iggy, you're too fat, right? Sort of is right, that sort of nagging of like, and what are you doing about it, right? Sort of like, right? And that sort of really difficult voice in the head that sort of self-criticizes, and then of course sort of then sort of like criticizes others, right?
Yeah.
In the same vein.
Yeah, I think for me, if we're talking about judgment of others, the thing I like to ask is if I feel like I'm being overly judgmental, I like to wonder, well, what is that reflecting in me, right? Like if I look at somebody, I'm like, oh, they're just so lazy, or they're so frivolous with money, or you know, I don't know, then maybe if I look at someone who's like taking a long vacation and I think that they don't have good work ethic, maybe it means I need a break, right? So I typically believe that when we are in a overly judgmental state of others, this has been my personal experience, it's reflecting something within me that needs my attention, my love,
Exactly.
my compassion. So maybe I need a vacation if I'm looking at everybody taking a vacation and I'm thinking that they're being lazy. So what shadows of mine have I not sat with or been with, because it's making me hard to be around other people that are triggering that within me. So that's my opinion. I'd be curious how you feel about judgment of others. What does that bring up for you?
I think it's very similar. I think that so I would say two things. One is that I don't believe that you can be non-judgmental completely.
No, it's
I,
very hard.
I,
Yeah.
I think that we are all judgmental, right?
Yeah.
Um, that voice, I think in that sense, it's very similar. That voice in the head that says, that person is too this or not enough this or whatever it is, right? Um, so the question for me always is, well, so if I can't fight the judgmentalism, the only thing I have control over is my actions. Do I let that control my actions? And
Yeah.
that's a completely different question, because I think that for me is something, yes, I can control my actions, and that I need to deal with. And in the same way I said before, that when the judgmental comes, it's like, what is it about that really bothers you? Because
Yeah.
that almost always says something that I need to work on.
Yeah.
Right? And almost always want to avoid.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, right?
Right.
Right.
Because
So,
it's going to require you to be
that's right.
introspective and be like, what is it that's they represent that's bringing up something within me? And that's an evolved way of thinking, right? Because if we don't have that awareness that, oh, when I'm jealous or when I'm envious or when I'm judgmental, it probably has to do with me.
Right.
Nobody teaches us these things.
No,
Like, no.
we do. We are. Here we are
we,
using this
here
thing.
we are. Okay, I will say nobody in my childhood or adult life like talked about those things.
Right.
And so we have to gain tools to like learn how to navigate that. We have to gain tools of learning how to be with that discomfort of those things that are being evoked within us. And that's what we're trying to do here.
Right.
Is how do we lean into that discomfort instead of avoiding it, ignoring it, and find ways that we can have tools to work through that. So it may be journaling, it may be therapy, it may be coaching, it may be meditation. Like that's why I think it's very essential that we have all of these practices to understand ourselves deeper, whether it's coming to a webinar or talking through it with somebody who allows that to be a safe space. But we need to understand ourselves better so that we can unblock that and
Right.
move forward, honestly.
Right. And also, I want to add to that list, and also art. right? I mean, I always feel that like
Absolutely.
right, sort of
Absolutely.
artists, right, sort of have been doing this in a different way, right, all the time. That is, right, they will put out to the world, and that's why sort of really good art disturbs us, right? That's why really good art like evokes us, because right, they say this is, you want to try and avoid this, you want to try and hide this, right? And especially sort of like art that is social commentary, right? And so you're like, ooh, right? I didn't want to see this. I didn't really want to
Yeah.
see myself in the mirror, right? And here we are, right? And and you know, how we're just saying that we're only starting to have these conversations, making this normal.
Yeah.
Um, but yes, but I think that part of the truth is, I think part in our own spiritual past, we did have these conversations, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think, right? So um, speaking of different conversations, right? So like we're on social media, like everybody else, right? Whatever. And a couple of weeks ago, I posted this thing about something I felt really strong about, but somebody else, some other rabbi who was doing something that I thought was pretty harsh and wrong, right? And a few of the comments were, well, that's not so compassionate, Rabbi. Well, that's not so kind, Rabbi, right? So like, right, so like, right, it's sort of like, hey, this persona of yours, right? That sort of you are really right, sort of, it's doesn't jive, right? So like in one things, and one of the things I thought about at that moment, and I think that's part of the conversations we're having now, is that we've lost our ability, or we've lost our ability to be as strong about our rebuke, right?
Being strong about what? Sorry, I missed that last part.
Rebuke, right? Using the tools we learn from the inner critic towards our outside world, because we want to make everything soft and beautiful and avoidant and right, and I don't want to have, right, which is like, I don't want to have that conversation. I want to have a nice family meal. I don't want to bring it up in Thanksgiving, right? Sort of like, right, there's no like, no, dude, this is wrong, because we want to avoid it, right? But then I think that brings up the inner critic back to ourselves. We're like, you should have said this, you didn't stand up for yourself, you know, like all these things, right? And they're all related. But I think in that sense, sort of looking at the conversations we need to have with others and how avoidant we are of those.
Sometimes, I mean, sometimes people are really
yes.
Yeah, and sometimes people are really aggressive. So I think it just depends on it depends on a lot of things. For me, my journey of navigating conversations that were challenging was, one of the biggest things I had to learn was, how do I keep my cool? That was really hard for me when things go, because if you're talking about fight or flight mode, I go into freeze. It's like fight, flight, or freeze. I just stand there. I don't know what to do. I'm too invested to leave, but I'm not ready. But I don't want to fight. I'm too scared to fight. So we have to learn ourselves really well first, because the thing that challenging conversations are doing with us is they're escalating our nervous system. We're going into uncharted territories. Again, same thing as with the inner critic. It's like, all of the things that are a risk at belonging and safety are being triggered in that moment. So it can be a lot feeling easier to avoid it. But what we need to do is learn how to navigate those with more ease and intention and mindfulness. And what I think is the most powerful tool when it comes to, there's two things I'll say I started with my journey. One is me taking responsibility for my experience and what I'm hoping to gain from the conversation. That's a really, really big one. Instead of putting the responsibility on the other person, blaming them if it goes awry, but I have to first take responsibility for myself and what I want to come. I have to take responsibility for teaching myself how to navigate challenging conversations. It was not something that was taught in my, family dynamics, and I don't blame anybody, because they're not natural things or they're I feel like you're lucky if your family talks about these things. So I had to educate myself. The second aspect of it too is, as I began to want to have the attention of, okay, I want to talk about my needs, my boundaries, my perspectives, all of these things, I had to learn how to practice that in safer environments. So with people that I knew I could navigate challenging conversations with. You're not going to go to your most complicated dynamic, your most complicated friendship, relationship, whatever it is, and they're a hothead and you argue all the time. You're not going to go straight into that relationship being like, now I'm going to have bold, challenging, hard conversations. For me, what I learned was, how do I go into environments where it feels safe, where I believe that we can navigate this, where I already inherently know that they're more calm, they're more level-headed, and that I can begin to practice these tools of standing up for having uncomfortable conversations. It makes you build your confidence to do it with other people that it may be more challenging for initially. That's been really helpful for me. It's how do I start in an environment that feels comfortable, and then learn from that, build up my tolerance, and then learn how to navigate more challenging conversations with people that I feel really different from.
Right. A few comments,
Yeah,
right?
I feel like there's things.
Right. Lucky if your family discusses these things. How about if your family causes these things? I think a lot of them do. We'll talk about in a second, right? So like Jose love, that sounds huge. Yes. Why do we play, right, in therapy? And how do you come up with that? And so it's funny, right? Not just that we do play acting in therapy. I believe that's the role of ritual. The role of ritual in one's life is to constantly challenge ourselves to sort of like, right, negotiate. Like in recovery, I often, when people were about to leave sort of the treatment space or whatever, one of the interventions I used to always do with them is to spend a couple of sessions putting out index cards and writing different scenarios that they would face. Right? Your dealer calls you, say like, hey, saw you on the street, whatever, I haven't seen you in a while, you know, do you want anything, right? Or friends are like, oh, come, let's go party, right? Or hookup, sort of like texts you, says like, hey, come, let's, you know, let's party and play, or whatever it is. Or you walk by the bar that you always go to, or your family's offering you wine, whatever it is, right? And to write then on the backside of it, to write your response. Now, when you're safe in treatment, what is the right thing to say?
Yeah.
Right? And to carry those in your pocket so that when you are facing that scenario, right, you are not, right? It's the opposite between going to the grocery store hungry without a budget or a list, right? And going to the grocery store not hungry with a budget and a list, right? Yeah. Sort of like, right? One will always make you buy things you don't need, 100%. And one is more likely for you to not, right? And I think as soon as you practice, right, your response, your ritual, your understanding of it, you get a better sense of it. But, and I think is always with us, right, that sort of, it's a both and rather than either or. When you feel yourself at a family gathering or whatever, when you feel triggered, to call it, whatever, for like, I don't love that word, but like when you feel the emotions bubbling up, that means you care. That means there's something in there that you have to do the work in, right? And almost, I think in family situations, because almost always it's something that sort of have to do with self-worth, that you're not heard, that you're not seen, that all these things, right? Or that sort of, right, that sort of your family doesn't share the same political things. And part of it is to say, how can I respond versus how can I react?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. And it's so funny because it's like, I feel recently that I really understood the value of those two different words, where I used to think that they were one and the same, and they're absolutely not. So, you know, response is when we get to take time to feel really integral in how we're engaging, right? And one of the things that I kind of mentioned, but I think one of the most powerful tools that we can come to in terms of challenging conversations is understanding our own nervous system when we are in that mode of fight or flight. Because I will tell you, like, neurologically, when you're in that space of fight or flight, fight, fight or flee, free, whatever it may be, you are neurologically incapable of creating empathy. And I think empathy is the most important element of having a challenging conversation. And when I define empathy, it's being able and willing to understand the needs and perspectives of the counterpart. Not necessarily that you agree, but that you are able to be with their needs and that you're able to vocalize yours. When we are in fight or flight mode, that cannot happen.
Right.
So it's really essential to have a practice with your own nervous system and to notice when somebody else's nervous system is out of whack. I can see it immediately with some family members. I mean, sometimes it's because they yell or they get angry or they storm off or whatever, the more obvious ones.
Like,
or
oh, you think they're upset, Jordan? Wow.
yeah, right.
That training really paid off.
Totally. Or with family members that are more avoidant, they get extra sarcastic or they start making jokes, whatever. They're in their fight or flight mode. And so I have become aware that I'm like, oh, nothing can happen at this point. Let's take a pause. Right. And we can be so scared of pauses, but it's actually the most powerful tool that we can embody when we want to come from a response versus a reaction. So when in doubt, I always recommend to pause and check in with your body, your nervous system, your mind, like your heart rate, all of those things. Right. Because when we are really far past that point, then I just don't believe anything productive can happen and we won't have successful outcomes. And then that's when we give into weaknesses, to temptations, to bigger arguments where you're like, that is not how I wanted to respond. I did not want to yell. I did not want to argue. I did not want to say those things. It's because we're not giving ourselves the pause to digest what's happening and come back to it. And that's really, really hard. My experience I've had with people where they're yelling at me, where they're criticizing my boundaries, they're criticizing me as a person. And it's my responsibility to take care of my own needs. And that's something that I think you said, like say somebody says something and it triggers you. How much can you sit in that discomfort before it's harmful to you? And what do you need to do to take care of yourself, either in that moment or to take a pause and come back to it?
Right. Yes. No, I think that's right. And there are sort of really cool tools around it, right? I think, right, sort of like, for example, in anxiety, but it also works with I mean, I used to do it with my kids when sort of like, right, so like you can't just tell them to sort of like maybe sort of calm down, right? But so, right, so one of the very famous tools, whatever, is sort of to say to yourself, okay, right, I want you to think about 5 things you can see, right? Just name 5 things you see, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can see a pen, I can see a desk, I can see a person, right? Like, and then 4 things that you can touch. I can touch my pants, I can touch the table, I can touch whatever it is, right? Then 3 things that you can, right? 3 things you can hear, right? I can hear my voice, I can hear their voice, I can hear the dishes in the kitchen, whatever. 2 things I can smell, right? I can smell her cologne, I can smell the bread, I can smell that. And then 1 thing I can taste, right? I can drink some water or whatever it is, right? And by doing this, you can sort of slow down your nervous system, right? When you can sort of like think, and it's not just like go into your head, meditate, think of your happy place. I'm like, like whatever, fuck that. Right? Sort of like, like
it's
sort of like,
not
right?
easy in the moment,
Right.
right?
So right. So let's make it more tangible. And I find it even for a lot of adults, that's very, very useful. It allows us to, right, to sort of to regulate our sympathetic system to such a place where we're able to be more mindful of what's going on, right? Sort of more mindful of ourselves and more mindful of the world around us. And this giving us enough time to respond rather than react.
Absolutely.
Right? And bring some empathy, right? To see also that we're connected.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not sitting here alone.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that. That's a great tool. And I love that you discovered it through children, but you're like, but I can imagine like, my grandparents, like that would be really helpful.
Oh, absolutely.
They might find it condescending, but
I use it, right? And I use it, to be honest, I used it a lot. It's a little off the topic, but I used it a lot at the beginning of COVID, right? And a lot of like anxieties about the future and about what's going on. And, oh my God, I just touched the doorknob. That's it. I'm going to die, right?
Absolutely.
Like, right? So, right, then I be like, Iggy, right? Sit down, take a breath, right? You're okay. How do you know you're okay? Because I can see my bedroom and I can see my office. These are 5 things I can see. These are 4 things I can, right? So like, okay, I'm here. All right. I'm going to drink a, swig of water. You're okay now. Stop. Right. And again, as usual with that as well, I used to be like, because anxiety is always about the future, right? It's never in the present.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So even as an adult, I still use this tool, right? Somebody, right? Michael just said when pausing, not doing anything for me is an action that has been helpful. Letting nature take its course and stepping back has worked for me. The addict in me tries to sabotage my recovery, thinking I always, yeah. So that's a great segue to some of the things, right? So because and then Chava writes, I had to do a lot of breathing practices to go around me. I'm adding the 5 things you can see. That, oh, good, yes. And we can put this on our website as well. We can think, but yes, it's sort of the this what we're talking about, the inner critic. We talk about this sort of the response, right? Especially for people in addiction, right? Our instinct, our voice in our head, in many ways, sometimes tries to kill us. So like, right? What if my instinct is right? My instinct is broken, right? I choose, right? So for example, when I was younger, I won't pretend, right? I'm you know, sort of like on to disclose it, sort of like I chose all the wrong men for me. I constantly chose, right? And I constantly chose the wrong people for me.
Yeah, totally.
Right? I made the wrong choices, right? So, but at the time they felt the right choices.
Yeah.
Right. So how do I tackle the fact of saying like, well, I've been wrong so far. Like, why would I even trust myself, right?
Yeah, I think like learning how to trust ourselves again is a long practice. And you know, and I think sometimes it has to be forgiveness for our past quote unquote decisions or mistakes or ways that we've learned, because at the time it served you in some way, because it was in some way familiar or safe or served you. So that's what I'm saying with the inner critic. It's trying to keep you safe, and safe doesn't mean what we logically think safe might mean. In terms of recovery, safe and familiar might be is addiction, is codependent relationships, is whatever it is that you are using to numb and to serve you, because in some way it is keeping you feeling safe. So again, I still think the most powerful tool is learning how to distinguish between those two voices, like how to release those decisions from the past, distinguish that I am not that inner critic. And I understand that at one point that was safe and familiar, but being sober is probably uncharted territory or scary.
And terrifying.
And so terrifying. So the inner critic is going to keep you in what it knows, and what it knows is addiction. And so it's going to continue to run those narratives to keep you into that realm. So the more that you can separate yourself and be like, I see you, I hear that is what feels safe, but I got this, right? That trust me, I got this. Like that's where you have to learn how to tune into that more calm, safe inner knowing. Because the inner critic too, another way of like distinguishing it is understanding its tone. Like the inner critic, if you think about it, it's going to be a lot more like chatty. It's going to be more rapid, more anxious, more aggressive, more problem oriented, like all of those things. So that's one way to be like, oh, this isn't me. This is that voice, that energy, the whatever you want to name it, where your true essence, your true being is going to be calm. It's going to be more solution oriented, more compassionate. And we may have an existence where we feel like our inner critic is us. And it's just because it's been running the show for far too long. So we have to do what we're doing here, tool up and begin to develop a practice of how to disempower it. So it's not running the show, and we begin to cultivate that softer, more wise, inner knowing knowledge and voice versus that anxious, aggressive, critical voice inside of us.
Hashtag cancel culture. Your show is canceled, Inner Critic.
Yeah.
We're putting on a new show. You're canceled.
Absolutely. I mean, yes, and I mean, I agree, like it's canceled, but it's also like, I think the more that on it, it's just kind of funny. I think the same way with some of our like pain and our hurt and our wounds, it's like the more we give like attention to it, the more we learn how to be with it, the softer it gets. You'll probably realize like as soon as you say, oh, the inner critic's here, oh, I'm feeling anxious. Like sometimes when I'm feeling anxious, I just say it 10 times. I'm anxious, I'm feeling anxious, I'm overwhelmed. And every time it gets a little softer because we're naming it in order to tame it.
Have you ever seen The Producers?
The Producers?
Yeah. There's a great in there line. There's a great line where he's like, I'm anxious. I'm very anxious. I'm very anxious. And the guy throws this bucket of water at him to try and calm him down. And he's like, I'm anxious and I'm wet.
But maybe a little less anxious.
Yeah. Right. Chava writes, I used to climb and jump off moving trains as an early addict. Oh, Rachel. Yes, I hope. Do you mean real trains? Because little like minor hashtag respect if it's real traits, but I assume you just mean relationships with people. Like my favorite text, oh, those afflictions. Yes, Jason, it is like, are these afflictions there to you? We can love that inner critic to death. Yes, real traits. Oh wow, I need to hear about this. That sounds relatively cool, I think. But dangerous, and don't do it. But yeah. But that's a funny joke, Al. I think yeah, so right, so maybe not cancel culture, maybe like we're putting you on the 3 a.m. Cable show, in a critic. We'll get back to you when we're
absolutely you just don't get as much airtime.
That's right. So how do we take that into conversations that we need to have, right? Whether it is conversations with once we started having a conversation with others, how do we take this conversation to others? Right? We all have I think everybody here has people or things or family members or friends or other whatever people that we need to have a conversation that we're avoiding. How do we take that into the producers,
I mean, I would love if anybody has an example, like, because I love working with examples. If you feel comfortable to share, like maybe a conversation that you want to have that you're avoiding, or a specific topic in that realm, that's helpful to work with. But I think in kind of a high level answer, it helps us when we have a more compassionate internal experience. It helps us have clarity as to what do we need to communicate with other people. So we kind of talked about boundaries, right? Or we brought up the idea of discussing boundaries. And it can be near impossible to articulate our boundaries if we're not even positive what they are within ourselves. So then how do we begin to develop the ability to communicate them with others? And I think what we're doing is like, first I believe have to create a more positive internal experience, and develop the tools so that we can stay calm and clear when we are having challenging conversations. Because if your internal dialogue is like, you're not deserving, you're not enough, they're going to reject you, all of those things, like if we're believing those stories, then we're never going to even have the ability to begin to have conversations that feel hard or challenging or are putting us at risk in some way. So a hard conversation could be, talking to a family member about significantly different viewpoints in life. It could be asking your boss for a raise. It could be asking your partner for more space by yourself, because although you love them, you still need autonomy and time to yourself. And verbalizing your needs and your values and what's important to you. So if you have a negative experience that's telling you your needs are not important, your values are not important, they're going to reject you, blah, 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 then that's you're at a negative start in the beginning, the beginning of the race. So I think in terms of why, when you and I were talking about this workshop, why it's an essential first step, I believe. And the better you get at communicating with yourself, the better you get at communicating with others, because you begin to build more self-compassion, more self-trust, more clarity, and then you can extend those to other people. You and I have talked about this a lot. It's, we have to start with our practice of ourselves so that we can do better work in the world, so that we can be in better service, that we can be a better friend, partner, all of those things. So for me, if we don't do this internal work, then there's no way that we can really be as strong as we'd like to externally. So that's something that always feels like a motivational factor for me in terms of.
I mean, what I'm hearing in here, right, and I think it's interesting because I think it relates to what we're just saying, but in an articulate way, to say that it sounds like what you're saying is, when first and foremost, I would say, like, right, the first element is to inventory, right? Mm-hmm. I would say to people, like, what are the difficult conversations that you are avoiding, right? Yeah. Right. If the topic is challenging conversation in your journal, right, Moshe, and others, right, then what are they, right? Write it down. Yeah. Conversation with X, Y, and Z about so and so, right? And then I think then the other part is what I'm hearing for you is to say, okay, what is it I'm trying to say? Right?
Yeah.
What are the points that I'm trying to bring across? Right?
Yeah.
Right?
And
Right. So here, everyone, I've been scared to talk about anti-racism in groups or online, but I'm in a showing up for racial justice small group with facilitators to learn how to talk and about anti-racism and process it for myself. It's a safe space to learn and practice, which is helping me feel comfortable talking about it in the world. Yes. So I think so very au courant, right? I think that currently having conversations about racism is definitely conversations that are hard to have, especially if you're a white person,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So right, so I think that's really important to sort of to realize, of course, right, that it's not just about the family dynamic, but it's also sort of like part of also the culture around us.
Yeah, absolutely. And and what Jess said in that example, in terms of like how she's navigating having a challenging conversation, is first she's educating herself. So what do we have to do first in order to have conversations with other people? So then in terms of like, how does that translate? So does that translate to, you want to talk about, anti-racism work with your friends and family, or with people that have significantly different viewpoints than you? What are you, we kind of talked about this in the beginning, but it's like, what are your intentions? What are you hoping to get out of the conversation with somebody? And, this is a method that I believe in, but can be really hard, but it's still coming from a place of empathy for the other person, no matter how different your viewpoints are. And especially with topics like that, it can feel really, really hard to listen to somebody who, if your belief and your standpoint is in anti-racism work and they have the complete opposite view, it can be really hard to sit and listen to them. And somebody said, I want to have better conversations. I want to be a better listener. And I think it's one of the most powerful tools that we can, or one of the most powerful intentions we can try to embody. It's, how do I understand them instead of trying to force them to understand me? And it's really, really effective, but it's very, very hard because it's counter to what we want. We want to have our viewpoints understood. We want to have our needs, everything that we care about, to be seen and heard and accepted. However, so does the other person. So they want to feel seen and heard and understood as well. And so I believe if we come to a conversation with the intention, the mindset of, how do I understand them? What can I gain from opening a compassionate conversation with this other person, instead of I'm trying to resolve it and I'm trying to get them to believe in my viewpoint? It's not easy, but
right.
I think it can be
how
really
do you do
effective.
that? Do you have some suggestions? So, right, you're going into a conversation, you're going to your whatever, your family for Saturday, for Shabbat. You know that they're going to say something that sort of is going to be whatever, upsetting, right? How do you step into that conversation with that mindset? Do you have any suggestions?
I think it has to be patience. And I think it has to be like releasing the expectation that there might be a resolve from that one conversation. Instead, maybe you're just opening up insightful dialogue. I heard this story of this Black jazz musician who traveled all through the South, during the civil rights movement. I need to find his name. I will research that. I forget, but the story really stuck with me, because what he would do is he would talk to members of the KKK, and he just wanted to hear their story. He wasn't trying to get them to not be racist. He was just trying to understand, why do you feel this way about me? Why am I your enemy? And because he wasn't coming at them aggressive and was coming with a sense of curiosity and compassion, a lot of the times they were just lost souls, right? Like they grew up in an environment where nobody cared about them. The KKK was the first environment that did. And so they just fell into this way of life. And through the story, he said, like, years down the line, like all of these people that he would have these conversations with, like eventually, like they would mail him his like their cape and their hood and say that they retired because he was the first Black man that ever just talked to them like a person. And that's an extreme example, but it's just the power of allowing other people to feel heard and releasing the need to come to a conclusion or a resolve, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so interesting. So what first of all, what I'm hearing, and I think I like this in that sense of like to be uh, um, a really interesting point, which is to not walk into a conversation thinking that this will resolve it. I
Yeah.
think that's a great first frame for me, right? So to know that this is just a part. Laurie Morris says Daryl Davis was the musician.
Oh, thank
That
you.
yeah, that sort of like right, the sort of that is a really important point, right? To not think that this conversation, this meal, this right, will
Yeah.
fix everything, right? Because I think that
Right.
puts it in a larger perspective, which I really, really, really like,
Yeah.
right? So I think that's the first point. The second one is what you're hearing, right? And
Mm.
it reminds me what the story you said. It reminds me. There's a great movie called Best of Enemies.
Hmm.
Really, really, really terrific movie called Best of Enemies with Taraji P. Henson and Sam Rockwell, about sort of the South,
Hmm.
and what sort of things that sort of happened in the South, and this one woman, and this time in Durham in North Carolina, of sort of this conversation between sort of black people and the KKK, and they arranged something that I learned from that movie, which was these sort of conversation called charrettes.
Mm.
And the charrette is very much what you're describing, to try and understand the other side,
Yeah.
irregardless of the yours. And I think that also comes to one of the comments that sort of Michael said, is sort of that, yes, you're right, but I think we can only have control over ourselves.
Yeah.
And in that sense, sort of like, if I come with my intention, then I can go to bed tonight sleeping much, much better.
Yeah. And Michael, you said, I appreciated this. Are you making the assumption the other is open for dialogue? That hasn't been my recent experience. And I completely agree with that. That's not always the case. And
Right.
that can be really, really hard. But really, I think we have to be aware of when that's the case, right? And also not letting go, or not belittling the power of being a really good listener, because maybe initially they might not be open for back and forth dialogue, but if you allow them to be heard, they will be more open to hearing you as well. That has been the case. And that might be weeks, days, months. It may be a very long time before they are open for dialogue. But that's why if you come at an empathetic state from a like relaxed and calm, compassionate nervous system, and you're listening, it creates more possibility for us to come alongside each other instead of being on opposite ends of the bridge, the table,
Right.
whatever your
Right.
viewpoints might be.
Yeah. And I'll say this on a personal level, right? So that conversation that I had to have with my family or my community, right, that I know, right, negates my existence, right? Sort of, right? So like, right, for people who don't know, I grew up ultra Orthodox, right? If you've seen if you've seen the Netflix series, although it's an Israeli film called Shtisel, then that's how I grew up. That's pretty much my
Mm-hmm.
family. Um, so I had to have a lot of sort of knowing that the other side of the table is not open to the conversation. But
Yeah.
the only thing I found is that, right, um, the only thing I found that was really helpful for me in life, right, is to step in with my intention, to
Yeah.
not worry ever about the other people's intention, but to always be mindful of mine.
Yeah.
Because when I'm mindful of mine, I also recognize that I can't and I don't need to change anybody else's opinion. I just need to step into every conversation with my integrity, right?
Absolutely.
More often than not, even if it's not the result I want,
Yeah.
the conversation is a lot better for me at the end.
Absolutely. Yeah. When we can stay in an integral place aligned with our values and coming from a place of compassion, I think that's really all we can do. And the other thing that I was going to kind of come alongside in terms of like why it's really powerful to let go of our expectations of this conversation has to be the resolve, is because it takes time for us to create new thoughts, for
Right.
new neural pathways to connect in our mind. Like it actually takes time. So when people are actually quiet in a conversation, when there's a natural pause, as a coach, it's something I love. Like I sit in uncomfortable like silence all the time, because what that means is they're probably creating new neural pathways. They're being challenged to think differently, and it's uncomfortable and it takes time. So when you have the patience of this may not be resolved in this moment, it may take time, then I don't know, or actually it's really good if it takes time, because that means that actual change can happen. And so that's why I think pause and space and all of that is such a powerful tool that we have when we're having really challenging conversations with people from very different ideologies.
Right. Because I think also, and that's how it relates to how it started, being able to have difficult conversation means that we're able to have difficult conversation with the self as well. Right? That we're able to practice, right, that same tool with others, with ourselves, and vice versa with ourselves and others. Right?
Yeah.
That
patience, compassion,
that's
integrity.
right. That's right. Right. Compassion, patience, clarity. Clarity for me is a big thing. Right? What is it that you want to say?
Yeah.
Right? And not to, right, in that sense, again, not to worry about, I can't control what you learn. I can't control what you feel. I can't control what you think, right? I can barely control what I think and feel, right?
Absolutely.
So walking into difficult conversation with my clarity, with my integrity, with my intentionality to respond rather than react, is very much mirrored by my ability to have conversation with my own self-doubt, right?
Absolutely.
And mostly, of course, because right, we talked about this before, right? For me, there is no faith without doubt. A faith that has no doubt is dogmatic. A faith that has no doubt is stale. It's fragile. It will break as soon as one of the paradigms shifts. And without that critic voice, without the doubt voice that says, can I, can't I, right? Because I think that one of the beautiful things that, let's say that I start a new endeavor, and the inner critic says, I don't know that you can do this, whatever. And you're like, yeah, no, okay, maybe, whenever. When I do it, right? When I traverse that, when I'm able to, like, hey, I've done this, right? I've completed college, or I've, started my business. I left my cushy job for starting something new, right? Sort of like, right? We can take that win and catapult it to the next thing. It allows us to plant roots and say, okay, here's one more thing that I can do. And I think it enriches the inner critic. Because then the question is not how I self-doubted, but what did I learn from the doubt, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think actually having a healthy amount of self-doubt or even the inner critic is good, because it means that you're growing. It means that you're growing, that you're evolving, or that you're wanting to reach for more. It means that the thing matters to you, whether it's your business, your family, your interpersonal relationships. Like, when it's coming up, I like to think of it as a sign of, like, this matters to me.
Right.
This is putting me in a new version of me that's uncomfortable. This is requiring me to grow in some way, but it also means that whatever this thing is means something to me. So if you turn it into, it empowers us and encourages us. Absolutely. So for me, if I feel like it's been a really long time since I've heard my inner critic, it probably means I'm staying pretty good and cushy in my comfort zone. That's not a bad thing. But personally, as somebody that I'm a coach, so I'm pretty addicted to growth and change and transformation.
Right.
So to me, I think it's a good sign when we get to that point, because it means that we're evolving, and it means that we're doing something that matters to us. And likely it's on the other side of that, we believe will create something that will be better for us in the long run.
Absolutely. Laurie says, right, if I act with integrity and intention, I can let go of the result. I think if you act with integrity and intention, you have to let go of the result.
Yeah.
Right? Because, but not because you can't control it, because the result is you having more integrity and working with intention. That is the only result that counts, right?
Yeah.
Is the self-work, right? Again, because I can't do it, right? Right? In Hebrew, there's a saying that I learned in the military that says, I cannot shave on somebody else's beard. Right? So that I can't do that, right? It's always, it's me, it's my beard, right? I don't know that it translates, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Right? I'll do what sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, also, when you let go of the control and the expectations, then you can receive things that you never imagined in your wildest dreams as well, which is
That's
kind of Amazing.
Right? Stephen Mandel. Oh, hi, Stephen. Even if your project meets with failure, there may be a few opportunities to move on. That is the normal and required extent. Yes, and not only that, if, right, I was just talking about that today or yesterday. When you meet failure, which everybody will, whatever it is, project, personal, you'll meet failure. But that is a moment that you have to decide, am I taking this failure and learning from it, or am I trying to avoid this failure, not learning from it because it's uncomfortable, because I don't want to see how I fail, because I don't want to think that sort of like it has to do with my ego, because right, so like, because the inner critic will be like, right, see, that's why we don't try new things. See, that's why we don't go in the ocean. See, that's that, right? That's why mother was right, right? So like, right, we try to avoid that. We try to avoid feeling like shit. We try to avoid feeling things. We want to kind of like, oh, let's just forget it, whatever. That didn't work. Let's try an A, right? It's the sort of like, right? I hate when in the movies when they're like, somebody writes, he's like, crumples the paper and throws it out. Like, what the fuck? No. First of all, real writers don't work that way. And secondly, right? Secondly, right? I said, secondly, there's what a waste of paper, right? And third, right?
Environmentally, what are they doing?
Like, right? I mean, like, you use it for scratch paper, right? Whatever. And then thirdly, that's not how we fail, right? We have to use failure, right? As we say, by failing forward. We have to learn something from it. Otherwise, we wasted it. But that can only happen, right? That can only happen when we are not afraid of the inner critic and not afraid of the hard conversation.
Yeah.
And I would add, not afraid to look in the mirror.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
And they're all related, right? That's the way to say like, oh, now what?
Absolutely. And I have one of my mentors, she says this, and I try to embody it as often as I can, that there's no such thing as failure. It's just feedback. So like when we can have a softer relationship with failure where it doesn't feel like this big doomsday, horrible, we're not worthy thing versus it's, I tried, it didn't work. Now I get feedback to hear what didn't work, how I would improve it, all of those things. Then it doesn't feel like it's actually just part of the system for you to learn how to continue to refine whatever it is you want to refine. So if you're talking about failure in your work or in your relationships, like we're just learning how to refine ourselves and to grow and evolve. And it's an essential part of being a human. Like you said, it's not avoidable. So the more that we just have a softer, more accepting relationship, that I think if we can remove the shame from failure, we would feel a lot better, because that's the part where we feel bad. Like we feel such shame. But it's funny because we love underdog stories, right? We love stories of people failing and then prevailing, but we're so terrified of it.
Others. We like it in others. We like it in Hollywood.
You fail over there. That's good. I'm going to stay over here. But what's amazing is like the times in my life where I think that I failed the most, or it was the most turbulent or the hardest or whatever, it was when I transformed and grew the most as an individual because I was learning about myself. So although I don't exactly want those moments, but when they happen, I trust that I will grow and evolve and become a better person because of them. And if we learn that that's all that's happening, is we're just not getting the results we want. So what adjustments do we have to make in order to get the adjustments we want? And that event, that failure, was a great way to learn about it.
So I would say, I have two responses to this mentor. One is that my initial was like, no, there's failures. I'm sorry, but there sometimes you just fail.
You can call bullshit,
right?
for
sure. But more specifically, I think that if I were to revise it, I would say it's only a failure if you don't hear the feedback. That what makes it a failure is that if you don't listen to the feedback, right?
Okay.
Right. Otherwise, it could be an experience, right? Can you please state the saying of shaving humor? Yes, I mean it's you can't shave on somebody else's beard. We always remember failure, but we learn from them. The lucky one, we learn from them, Kathy, right? So that's the thing, right? We have to train ourselves to learn from them, because again, going back to the conversations, which is to the self or to others, right? When I suggest something to my team, and let's say it's a failure, I have to be open for them to saying like, well, that was a bad idea, right? Or that didn't work well, or you've done this wrong, you've done this wrong, right? That's the difficult conversation they have to have with me and I have to have with them, right? But it also then relates to the self, because the conversation to the self is like, see, that's why you shouldn't suggest anything, and not to say to myself, I'm a failure because I've had a failure, right? Right? To like what we said before, the thing, right? The failure is not me. It's just something that I'm doing, and not just to validate through this or self, right? So because that's really important, right? It's a way to always be prepared, raising all possibilities and when to stop. Yes, when you can, of course, right? Sort of like sometimes you can, but you know, it's funny, Stephen, what one of the amazing things I've been thinking about lately, I spoke about this before, was this book that I was reading about, it's called Anxiety and Genius, which is about anxiety and genius, but it's mostly about sort of the Jewish experience and how we are set in our traditions to create more anxiety, a lot more anxiety, because it produces genius. Because the anxiety produces, right, when you walk down the street and think like, well, with this, about this, when you worry about everything, you also see a lot of things. Yeah. And when you see a lot of things, you notice. When you notice needs and niches and opportunities, right? You're not complacent.
Yeah.
Right. And I always thought how it's a really long book. I'm making it very short for you, but like, but this idea to be prepared, but to anticipate. And in the book, it talks about this sort of like how we breathe this in so that we can be very successful, which is a very interesting thing. Other comments. Sometimes I play worst case scenario and blow it out of proportion. Then I dial it back and it's not so. Yeah, that's what my life, Lindy. That's like, absolutely. Yes, I think that's also every person in general, sort of, right?
Yeah. I love the worst case scenario game, because usually, and not just going to the worst case scenario, because what we do is we go to it and it feels very foggy and like vague, but getting really specific. So it's like, okay, well, if that happens, then what would I do? And it's like, oh, well, I'd probably have to move in with my mom. That would drive me crazy. So then I'd get another job. Typically it's something when you get to the end of it that you can actually manage. Like you're like, oh, okay. I mean, I don't want that to happen, but if I get specific, then it's a little less scary. So that's a great.
Yeah, no, it's funny because there's a recovery intervention like that. We call it play the tape out. Right? So everybody above the edge of 35 will know what I'm talking about. If you're below 35, maybe I need to explain like what a tape is. But right. But the play the tape out, which is like the then what game, then what, and then what, and
Absolutely.
then what. Which is, by the way, the opposite of something that I think is the very positive thing, which I always talk to my clients, which is describe your perfect workday, not a vacation, like, right? Be as specific as you can.
Yeah.
Right? Sort of like what really thing. Lori's asked him, 71 years old, negative pathways covered, but can I still change? Absolutely, you can still change. 100% you can still change. And I'm not saying this is like, yeah, you can change, Lori, but it is proven actually multiple times over that, right, the neuroplasticity of habit, right, can change almost at any age, mostly because we're not terribly sophisticated creatures. Mostly because, right, if you tell yourself something enough times, you'll start believing it, right? And that's true at 71 as is true at 12. So yes, you can definitely change.
Even just being here is a
exactly. Is there a better understanding of failure in Hebrew? So
it feels like we're in the Q&A portion, just saying.
Oh, we are. We have 12 minutes left for this, so we are the Q&A portion. Yes, I would say Joe Carroll, in the sense that sort of like I actually wanted to comment before, but Jordan said misguided, right? Which is right. When we talk about a Tshuva group, right? For those of you who are aware or not, right? We have a Tshuva group at 5:30 on Thursdays, which is an actionable thing to how to live a better life, and it's on our website. But we'll get to that in the end in a few minutes too. But the Hebrew word for sin, for example, chet, does not mean sin the way we use it sort of now, it's sort of like kind of Judeo-Christian thing, but it means to miss the mark. It means that you tried, you aimed, right, from archery, but you missed the mark, right? You tried to, but it just missed it. So now it's a question of realigning, readjusting, right? So right, again, it's trying to not validate from the end result, but how to make the better aim. And one of the things I love about Zen practices for archery, for example, which is one of the reasons we chose this term in the first place, um, because it was the closest to the Hebrew one, is that when you learn archery for the first, I think, 7 years, you don't even touch the bow. It's
Mm.
all
Yeah.
make believe, right? Because you have to
Yeah.
learn the actions before you can even get the feedback of the bow, which I love.
I love that.
Right. What are your ways? Sorry, what are your ways for you to develop
Mm,
resilience? What are the skills or steps to get started?
yeah.
Thoughts, Jordan?
Totally. One of the ways I actually will, I'm going to post something in a minute when we're wrapping up, but I have a tool that I think will really be supportive of how do you begin to see your own abilities and resilience. But Stephen, what I would start with, so I'll send this to you, but what I would start with is looking at all of the things that you've already been resilient through, all of the things that you've already overcome, like begin to build a reservoir, like, and you can do this in many ways. Like you could write down all of the challenges in which you've overcome, all of the ways you've grown, all the ways that you've already been an example of your own resilience. You could make a physical example of it, like writing it on a post-it note, putting them in a jar, like something where you're like, wow, look at all of these ways that I've already overcome. Because the thing is if we're all sitting here today, we've all overcome 100% of the challenges that have been presented to us, even if we feel like we're in a state of growth and healing and recovery, all of that, but you're still here on this call right now. And so take a inventory of the ways in which you've already been resilient, and I promise that will already make you feel stronger, versus how can I be resilient in the future. Acknowledge how you've already been resilient up until this point.
Right.
If
And
that
I would,
feels
and
good.
I would, I so saying that, and I would expand that to think about
Mm,
resilience, not just on an individual level, but
yeah.
resilience on a family level and resilience on a community
Love
and national level, right?
that. Yeah,
Definitely part of the Jewish story is the story of resilience
absolutely.
from all the way from Bible to now. And part of learning the text is understanding that the resilience is built into us, that it's not just your personal
Absolutely.
endeavor, but to
Yeah,
connect to a much larger scope of things, I think is very important as well. To see yourself
absolutely.
as part
I
of a
love
larger
that.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm going to go ahead and put a link in here for everybody for my website. So I have a
Yeah. Yeah.
ton of resources for you guys. One that is about building self-trust. So it's jordanaftanas.com/trust. If you sign up with your email, you will receive a bunch of these tools. Like I have a whole presentation of information that we went through. And Stephen, I have an exercise that will guide you through that really powerful self-trust exercise as well. So everybody, please feel free to open that. There's some really good goodies in there for you all. Thank you, Jess. Yeah, I was like, that's not an active link. You're so helpful.
There you go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Jessica's posted it. There's some really good stuff in there. So I think that,
Absolutely. Absolutely. You guys should think. Lori, it's called Anxiety and Genius by, I think his name is Lebrecht. Um, so yeah. So I think that's things. That's the link for Jordan's work. And then right, just wrote right. So I talk about Truva Group, right? Truva Group is a way that we have come up with to sort of do weekly work on a lot of these things. And on the self, right? It's really a powerful tool that takes through a very hands-on actual tool on how to gain better mastery of your life and have sort of like a really a stronger spiritual life, a strong life of meaning, and a stronger ability to have multiple conversation with the self and the others. And it's sort of kind of like getting a little bit of like spot coaching every Thursday with me in the group. So that's a really good thing. You could do that. Yes, that's the book. Yes, exactly, by Norman Lebrecht. That's the book. Also, right, if you should go to Jordan's website for all the different things that she offers, right? So there's a course that sort of that I really, really loved seeing, and we just had the conversation on IG Live about it, about if you want to build your own vision and mission in life. Jordan is really great at sort of doing that. I think it's a 6-week course, I think, right?
yeah,
That one
yeah.
is not free, but still sort of like you should definitely sort of see the work that sort of that Jordan's doing, which is really, really, really awesome.
Yeah.
Roslyn just wrote, is having an inner critic learned behavior? There definitely is a difference between recovery when I didn't have a voice, when I was only known by my size, weight, and in recovery when I stand up for what I believe and can stand up for myself. At the same time, words hurt, and I'm trying to be kind always. I use the saying, words are like food, chew them up, and know which have to swallow and which one can be left out. Absolutely. I think that we all are born. I don't know if John agrees. We're born with certain inner critic, and that's why I think part of the point is that it's not always all bad. The inner critic is trying to really help you, right? Sort of.
I completely agree. I absolutely think it's a learned behavior, because if you look at the people either you grew up around, if you look at the environment that you were in, you know, how are they talking to themselves? How are they talking to you? Because like I said, it's going to be a reflection often of people in your life. So when we're talking about people that might have a gentler inner critic, maybe they didn't have those environments where they were harshly criticized, or they didn't have, you know, parents or family members that exuberated like obvious inner critic. Like I have people in, I grew up around that it's obvious they have a very judgmental experience with self. And so I thought that was normal, right? So I think, again, it's like, how do we unlearn all these things that are not serving us? I think that answers your question. So it's definitely, we are influenced by the people around us, around our inner critic, which is why it's so important for us to be around more conscious and compassionate beings with that treat themselves that way and treat other people that way.
And to know that I think, right, the inner critic grows with us.
Yeah.
And right. And in that sense, again, we have to embrace them to understand what is it trying to say to us, right? So, and it grows with us in different way. You get it from all your parents. First 7 years of your life, you learn.
Yeah.
7 years lives trying to change them.
I don't like to blame them for everything, but it's influential.
That's the no. Sure. Because I also know people who grew up in a very liberal family without sort of a lot of criticism, without a lot of support, right? But in that way, that's a self-critic in a different way, because that sort of like doesn't allow them to really find their own boundaries, right? We didn't have a lot of time to talk about boundaries, but that creates a lot of people who just don't understand what boundaries are for themselves and for others. And that creates a different criticism to the self and a different conversation that are really hard to have with others because they don't know, right? And yes, and we can all grow. And that's the thing. We all have to continuously learn. But I think, right, we have a few minutes left, that I want us to, or at least my little thing is to always invite all the different measures of ourselves. Part of what I learned within our traditions is there are no bad traits. There's only the balance of the bad and the good, and only the measure of amount, right? French fries every day, breakfast and dinner is bad, but French fries here and there is not, right? Red wine, right, for the French is one thing. For an addict, it's another. It doesn't change the wine; it changes you, right? And in that sense, I think every measure that we see, we have to make sure that there's enough balance within our life, right? And that's really, really, really important, because you get to decide that. That's part of our own actions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, like we've talked about in terms of like just circling all back around, it's, you know, this work that we're doing here in this conversation helps us with all of those things. So we're doing things proactively, we're tooling up, we're empowering ourselves to have a more loving, softer, compassionate internal relationship. And I think no matter what, it will be reflective of our external relationships as well. So I don't know if we have any last minute questions. Feel free to send them out. The other thing,
and by the way, I want to add to Jordan's and wisdom, not just and to be wiser.
Absolutely.
To know better, right?
Yeah, to do something with all of this. The other thing that I will add in that link that's on there too, I wanted to offer, so everybody at this workshop, I'm going to offer you the opportunity for a free 90-minute coaching session with me. So,
oh, that's generous. That's great.
Yeah. So it's a big gift. And I'm happy to give it to you in the link that I sent you. Yes. In the link I sent you, there is a place where you can apply. As long as you apply within 48 hours, I will contact you and set up a 90-minute coaching experience with me. So please take advantage of it. I love meeting people through this capacity. If you found this conversation interesting and want to dive deeper and want support in a one-on-one capacity, please feel free to take advantage of that. I would love
that's
to.
Awesome. That's awesome. I mean, you know, that's the same for us, right? You know where to find us. We're at tshuvacenter.org. And we have multiple groups. We have Talmud studies. We have, the Tshuva group we talked about. We have a podcast that's coming out every Friday. There's over 30 episodes. Tomorrow's one is actually very interesting. I'm talking to a sexologist, not exactly a sexologist. I'm talking to a sort of sex mindful expert who really sort of talks about intimacy and sex and spirituality and creativity. That's really great. So check that out. Yeah, to some of the groups. And then you always know how to find me and ask us different questions, different elements. Feel free to text, DM, email both me and Jordan. This is what we're here for. Thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you everybody for the questions and the comments. Nurit, do you have your hand up? Do you have a question? Is that on purpose or is that a mistake thing? If you do, just put it in the chat. I'm happy to reply to this. Otherwise, we're just about out of time. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you. This is really amazing.
So fun.
I really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This will be online. If you missed it or shared it with others, we'll be online in a few days. We'll put it on our YouTube. Last word, Jordan?
Oh, I was just going to say, he asked about the 90-minute session. It's in the link. There's a way to apply. If anything's confusing, you can just message me. I'll also put my Instagram on here. You guys can find me, Mindful Jordan, on Instagram. So, but yeah, just thank you so much for having me, for hosting. I love our conversations. It's so fun. And I appreciate everybody just sharing and asking questions. I think we learn most effectively through conversation and story. Agreed. So yeah, everybody's willingness is a huge part of how we all grow together. So
great. Thank you again. Thank you, everyone. Have a very good night. Thank you for joining us. And we'll talk to everybody soon. Bye.
Bye. Sounds good.